Allana Coffee, and thank you for joining me this morning. I'm here with a wonderful guest, Dr. Sade Soares, and I'll introduce her in just a moment. But what I'd like you to know is we're outside because we're being safely and socially distant. So thank you for your patience with the ambiance. And that means that Martha and her baby chicks could come by, cats, dogs, kids, anything could happen. But we just wanted to invite you into the comfort of the outdoors. So thank you for that. We will talk through any of these ambient interruptions, whether it's a plane or motorcycle. So just bear with us. We're going to go straight through. Now, you know, the goal for these interviews is to bring psychology and the science of psychology down into everyday people's table. We just want you to know what it is. We want you to know who we are, what we study. We love it and we're passionate about it, but sometimes there's a lot of mystique and mysteriousness about it. But to us, it's just everyday living. We just want you to love what it is that we love, and that is the human mind and the human spirit. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Sade Soares. Now, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing your names properly. Is it Sade or Sade?
It's Sade, like the singer.
Sade, like the singer. Yes. And Soares.
Soares, yes. So it's interesting.
So
Soares
girl.
is a Portuguese name. It's my husband's name. Very recently, my father-in-law said, we've been mispronouncing it. It's supposed to be Soares. And I said, well, it's too late. The entire family says Soares. But I think it's one of those immigration things. You know, people come over and other folks are learning how to say your name and things get lost in communication or translation. And so now it's Soares.
I love it. I love it. Coffee is my husband's last name, but that's the dad's side. But he too is Portuguese boy.
Right.
So it's kind of something we have in common. I didn't know that until just now. And people amazingly misspell coffee as well. They just can't believe it's coffee.
That's like regular coffee.
Yeah, just good old coffee. So thank you so much for making the trek. I know you live West Side, so you had to come quite a ways. Thank you for coming. And, you know, we've just met during the pandemic, and it's been a really lovely meeting you and knowing you as a person. You have a wealth of experience, and you're like new. You're not that old. I don't know how you had time to do all of the things that you did. And so I want to kind of shape our conversation so that we are looking at like maybe some of the things that inspired you and brought you into the field of psychology. But before we do that, I was looking at your resume and I couldn't find online how I'm also supposed to address you professionally, because I don't know if I'm supposed to call you Captain Soares or Dr. Captain Soares, or can you clear that up for me? And
So when I'm doing any work that's not directly affiliated with the military, I identify as just Sade or Dr. Soares. When I'm at work, it's interesting because when I'm talking to my patients, they're all active duty members. And so I identify as captain because eventually they're going to meet me anyway and see those captain bars on me. And so at work, I'm Captain Soares, you know, in the military on base, but usually off of that, anything I'm doing in other professional arenas, I'm go by Sade or Dr. Soares. I prefer my first name because we're all professionals. Most of us are all doctors, and so I'd rather be as personal as possible. And I will make a very brief point that everything I'm saying here today, even if I speak about the Army, are all my views and my experiences and don't reflect the Army. I just have to say that.
I'm glad that you said that. So in the Army, did you graduate from West Point?
I did.
Girl, spill that tea. I was like, what? I've known you for months. Talk about humble. I would have like led with that, by the way, but I've known you for a long time. It didn't come up until I actually requested and read your resume. Talk about your experiences at West Point. And you know, she's tiny. You can't tell, but she may be 5 feet tall.
Right, on a good day. So I think humility is a big part of me and how I like to present to the world, because I don't know everything and I don't want to come across as that. I also think that my experiences are all little pieces of me, but West Point was a big deal and it was a wonderful experience. A lot of folks leave West Point, and I'm still on a lot of social media pages of West Point graduates, and we all kind of bemoan over the suffering that occurred just because it was very challenging. And the point is for you to be challenged. So at the academy, you have very rigorous schoolwork, academic work, very rigorous physical expectations. You also have to have a good understanding of the military knowledge, and you're constantly training. So, and your time is pretty set up for you, you know, from about 6 a.m. until the evening. And that experience shaped me in a lot of ways. It taught me a lot about myself and what I could persevere through. But it also taught me a lot about, it shaped my views of the military, because that was one of my most formative experiences. And what I encountered was an experience in which people really wanted to challenge me, really wanted me to challenge myself. But then there was a ridiculous amount of support on the back end, to the point where teachers would give us their home phone numbers and say, reach out to me if you have a question before the test. We had your first year, you really can't leave except for about maybe Christmas time or Thanksgiving. And so you would be sponsored by a professor who lives on base, and you would go to their house and do laundry there and hang out with their family. And so what I took from West Point was just what people can achieve when they feel really supported.
Oh, wow. You know, I actually see you doing that in your work as well. You really support your committees and you're available. Wow, that's and maybe that's one of the tender things that people don't necessarily associate with West Point or the military or the Army, is that it's really community and supportive of the family member. And that's anybody that's in that team. So, yeah. Wow. Thank you for that sense. I wouldn't have thought about that. Yeah. But it's true. We can do great things with that kind of support, and you have done amazing things. You know, I want to reflect on that humility piece that you talk about. You are from the islands. You're now living in Hawaii, and I know that you are married to, you know, also island boy. But, you know, can you talk about your formative experience?
Yes, so I grew up on this tiny island of Trinidad and Tobago that most people don't know exists. It is, and I just like to orient folks. So if you think of South America and you think of Venezuela, we're right there, almost touching Venezuela. Amazing. And we're so small. And I grew up in what we would call the country part of my island. And so very much like this is what my backyard looked like. A lot of mango trees, a lot of jungle.
Nice.
And I lived there until about I was 8 years old. And when we were growing up in Trinidad, you had the entire community, again, supporting you. So I grew up in a household. My mother was one of 14.
Oh, wow.
And so I grew up with lots of aunts and uncles and cousins. And I just remember always being surrounded by family, always going to someone's house, always playing with cousins and friends. And it just, you know, it was a very simple life, right? And then moving, I remember the transition to America was kind of stark. So, to say the least, I think what was missing is that sort of community support, or that constant of just knowing your community was always around. But I saw that folks were attempting that in New York. We had our little Caribbean town that we lived in. I lived in Flatbush in New York, surrounded by lots of other Caribbean folks. And so there was some sort of that atmosphere, it just wasn't the same. And I think the transition is also hard in terms of, I had a strong accent when I first moved here, and I nixed that really early.
Did you?
Because I thought I needed to do that to fit in, and I'm really regretful of that right now. But I was a kid, and a kid trying to fit in will do what they think is right.
Required.
But I recall my mom being very good at switching. Right? Some of us call it code switching, where you couldn't even recognize that it was her speaking at work, and because she sounded so different at home. And she really was one of the folks that kind of maintained that relationship or that connection for me to back home, because she moved by herself and with 2 kids, and the rest of my family, you know, folks ask me, like, do you still have family there? Literally everyone is still there.
Wow.
I have a few cousins that have moved to America, but most of my family still lives in Trinidad, in that same town, in that same community.
Cool. Have you been back with your babies yet?
I have not. We really were trying to go back.
Well,
this,
you know, we've all been put,
exactly. I thought that I would go back this winter. We thought this Christmas that we might have had a better hold on COVID, but that wasn't the case, unfortunately.
How are they doing there?
So not great in terms of COVID, unfortunately. The country just locked down again. And so, which is a big deal because similar to Hawaii, it's an island that really requires a lot of tourism to spur the economy.
Right.
We have something called Carnival that happens
yeah.
every year. Most people don't know about Carnival, but it is sort of a month-long party that occurs in Trinidad. It's, you know, we have a lot of vendors that's their biggest production month, right?
For the whole year.
Pretty much for the whole
Mm-hmm.
year. Yeah. And it's a great time. In Trinidad, Carnival actually started as a form of sort of a rebellion against slavery, you know,
Right.
so it was, you know, a way to celebrate the culture, to celebrate freedom. And it really is just an amazing time for us to get together, and I miss it.
Is it similar to the carnival that you would see like in Brazil
Yes.
or Louisiana?
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of
wow.
costumes, a lot of
Wow.
flair.
Honey, take me with you.
It's
Oh,
an amazing time. We call it a lot of bacchanal. There's a lot of
yeah.
it's a great time, and I'm hoping that I can take my family and kids one day soon.
You know, it's interesting to hear you talk about your experience growing up in Trinidad. You know, one of the things I think when people see, you know, two Black women, they may assume that we have, you know, the identical background, but we're so diverse, even within the African American, or
Yes.
not even African American, right? But African Caribbean
Right.
culture.
Afro-Latina culture.
Yeah, right. I mean, we're still learning about each other and appreciating
Right.
each other. And part of this interview is, you know, I'm so happy to share you with anybody that happens to be watching.
Yeah.
So, just so fun. We could like stay in Trinidad for the rest of it, but we've got to come back into, you know, the
Yes.
work that we do. But that is so cool and fun. Like I could get lost there. When you left school, I think, was it 2012, 11? Is that about when you
left college or?
when you left college? Because I think you were
Undergrad, yes.
active duty and deployed
Right. So
in some really, you know, dangerous situation. I mean, again, we have no idea how old this woman is, but that was like 2012, so whatever, like 9 years
I'll date
ago.
myself a little bit for you. I joined the Army Reserves when I was 17. I was
Okay.
still a senior in high school. I went and did basic training and my job training for the reserves right after high school. And then I came home and I did something called hometown recruiting. While I was doing that, my recruiter said, "You're pretty smart. How about you go to West Point? You know, have you thought about that?"
Wow.
And I said, "Why didn't you tell me that before you got your numbers and shipped me off to basic training?" But it was okay. This has sort of been kind of like the theme of my life, these unexpected things that occur. So yes, I immediately applied to West Point, was accepted to their preparatory school. So I applied pretty late and went there. So I went to West Point from 2006 to 2010. Directly after that, we have military officer training, a basic officer training. I went to that, and I immediately after that went to my first assignment in Kuwait. So that was my first assignment as an Army leader. So my job at the time, I was the officer assignment officer. So I was a human resources officer basically, and folks would come to our unit and I would say, "Okay, thank you for arriving here. Now you're going to Iraq, or now you're going to Bahrain, or now you're going to Qatar." I did that for about 3 months, and then I became the aide to our division commander. So this is a woman with a star, a Black woman with a star on her chest. She's a general. She's from South Carolina. She's still a great mentor and friend. And I did that for 12 months, working with her, writing her speeches, traveling to some of these places where we would land and there would be incoming bombs and missiles. And I smile because what can you do? I survived, you know? But we were relatively safe compared to a lot of our soldiers who were much closer. And more actively engaged in, meeting with forces that we were at war with. And so I spent about 16 months downrange in Kuwait. And then after that, the Army sent me to wonderful Idaho, where I met my husband. I never thought a day in my life that joining the Army would send me to a place called Idaho, but it did.
And you would meet an island boy, local boy.
And I met a Hawaiian Portuguese man in Idaho. And following that, I was able to get accepted to grad school and get my PhD in psychology. It's been a wild ride. It's been a great ride.
And you've showed up every day for that ride too. You didn't miss a day. So
No.
wow, good for you. So you're going to write the book. There's
I don't know
several
about that.
books here,
Several
like several
books.
different chapters. So, I get to be with you as a leader. It's really cool to have you, being the committee chair for this desk committee that we're on, the Diversity and Equity Steering Committee. This is how we've met. And, I said, Sadé Soares, well, that's a story there. And I thought I should, join this committee and be of support. And because I think, again, it's a committee where together we're better. And that's the bottom line and the basic message. But I'm so glad to have you at the helm. So tell us and the listener a little bit about DESK.
So HPA, like most other state associations, has a diversity chair or diversity committee. HPA just so happened to be one of those that only had a diversity chair. And what I recognized, so I had met the two previous diversity chairs and had great conversations with them, had working relationships with one of them. And what I noted was, when you're an N of one, it's hard to accomplish a lot. It's hard to, one, you have to figure out the position, right? That takes time. And then you want to put some energy into maybe some projects. Well, you're an N of one. And then they're usually putting forth these like diversity conferences. And I thought to myself, well, there's a lot that I want to accomplish, but then there's also a lot I can't even think about because I'm only in my own brain, right? Having a committee where I get the wonderful perspectives of other folks like yourself has really been amazing for me. I have been learning a lot, even in just things I think people don't think about in not just learning a lot in terms of diversity, but learning a lot in terms of responding, how I respond to things, the time I take to think about things, how fast or slow I move. I mean, there's just so much that I appreciate that the other members of the diversity committee have really helped me to grow in my own personal leadership and professionalism. Is just amazing. But hands down, we have been putting in work. And I don't think people really recognize, so let me just state some of that, okay? We have done something most other people have not done, which is survey our membership and write up an entire report about it in terms of how we are established in terms of diversity, the varying level of diversity where people think that we still need to work on. We've sat down and come up with an entire mission and goals and a strategic plan.
Right.
We are doing these things, putting forth the time and energy to curate these videos. We have folks scrubbing through our history of the organization, all of those historical documents to figure out, what has changed, what needs to continue to change. We are doing these monthly diversity updates. Folks are back channel coordinating with different organizations. I mean, there's just an energy there that there's no way I could sustain on my own. And so I knew I needed to create a committee of folks who are like-minded in terms of having a dedication to more diversity and equity, but so diverse that they can drive us into this direction of really shaping an amazing opportunity for HPA. What I'm hoping to come out of this is that we continue to have folks dedicated to this, and that we continue to see change, and that folks have more understanding of diversity and equity issues and are willing to slow down and listen and recognize that, there's so much that we don't know. There's so much bias that we all have. There's so much that needs to be changed for folks to really, we talk about ending human suffering, and we talk about, that's what our work is. Our work is to help folks kind of get through human suffering, and by our work, I mean a psychologist, right? And to be resilient and to strive and prosper through it. But what if we could work toward ending it as well, right? And that's a lifetime thing. That's generations, right? But that needle needs to constantly be moving, and that's what inspires me. Some days, you all know, some days it's hard. Some days I'm frustrated.
Chicken skin. What she said.
Right. Some days it's really hard, but when you have other people to lean on, when you have other people to look to and get some motivation from, it's what keeps me going. So that was a long-winded answer to say, I need you all, and I'm so happy that you all exist.
It's a perfect answer, and I don't think there's any way to shorten it, really. So it was well stated, because I think that people misunderstand what diversity means, and that, you know, it's like, it's so inclusive.
Right.
Everybody's really invited to the table, because we need everybody at the table.
Exactly.
Right? And I hear you really giving that voice. You're making that point, and it's an important point, because some of us can't get together and end human suffering. All of us have to get together to end human suffering.
Exactly.
So I hear you. You needed to use all those words.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And it's a lot of work. And it is a lot of work. I see you working, you know, just sending out those emails and calls and showing up. You know, now that some of the COVID restrictions have, you know, gone down. Thank you, everybody, for keeping yourself safe so that we could do this. You know, maybe we can be even more engaged in the community.
Yes,
right?
and I'm really looking forward to that, because I think there's so much we have to offer, especially as psychologists. This is what we do, right?
And you know, and it's a community that we have been welcomed and loved and embraced in, right? Like, we're raising our children here, and you know, we're maybe third or second generation here. So, you know, it's a community. I know I'm very committed to Hawaii, and I think you are too. You've got businesses other than psychology, don't you? You've got some other stuff going on. What else you got going on?
I will say this, to be quite honest, it's mostly my spouse at this time, because you know, you see what my work. I'm fully engaged in other activities, and the Army doesn't, you know, they keep me quite engaged as well. But I'm really excited. My spouse and I got together, and he is a certified public accountant, a financial advisor, virtual CFO, everything under the sun that has to do with money. He's doing it.
Well done.
And he's you know, and he's super motivated, just like I am, which is, you know, personally, it's a challenge, right, to have two very motivated, career-focused folks. But at this point, what we've done is we've combined our skill set, where he is able to do, you know, do all of the financial advising, taxes, bookkeeping, CFO functions for small businesses and individuals, and I can come in on the back end and speak to what is a new term and sort of a new field called financial therapy. So I've been doing a lot of I would call self-education on that, but also some coaching on the side, life, relationship, executive coaching. You know, it's hard for me to even think about it, but I've been in the Army since, like I said, since I was 17. It's been I guess 11 years now of being an officer, of working in teams, of working in executive spaces in the military. And so like I said, I'm pretty humble, but I recognize I do have a lot to offer in that capacity and in that space. And so we, you know, our business is called Hui Malama Advisors, and right now I do have a few clients where I'm coaching, and when I do that work, I think it's just like when we do our therapy work, it's transformative for both of us, right? I'm coaching folks who are stuck on their money mindset, feeling like, you know, because I have this debt, I'll never be able to amount to something, or, you know, my future, you know, is so bleak and so dim. But here we have, you know, able to sit down with them, create a budget and create a financial plan, and I'm able to help them get them through those stuck points. It feels magical when it happens, and you can see it excites me. And I'm only doing it on a very, very small scale now, because I want to make sure I can show up as authentically and not as tired, you know. But it's what we plan to do together once I retire. And so it's exciting. You know,
it is exciting, because so much of the anxiety and even the depression that we see in our patients, when we get down to some of the basics, it's that they're feeling really insecure and financially insecure, and then maybe even guilty that they're not adequately providing for their family or themselves. So then it creates another set of stressors. So, you know, when people are like, oh, I don't want to just go talk in therapy. Therapy is not just about talking. There's actually behavioral things that you do to make things better and right for yourself. And that reduces anxiety and decreases depression, just feeling more in control of your finances. Yeah.
Yes. And we know that finances is one of the biggest stressors for most of us, right? And so, yeah, it's been an amazing journey.
What's Abel's
so far.
number? I need to come.
I'll give it to you after this.
I need to call him up right now.
Okay.
Wow, what a wonderful thing. I mean, that's the thing about psychology, right? Like, we make it real. It is like, how do we use this tool, like, for real? And so you are fascinating. You know, I know that, like, you have to come back for the second and the third interview. Yeah, and the fourth book. But,
Right.
you know, we probably should wrap it up. But I think, you know, thank you so much for making the time, because your time is precious and valuable. And I know that you brought your children up for the drive. Tell me about the boys.
Yes, so I have two. He will actually be 3 this month. His name is Sade Soares, and Adisa is a Yoruba name that means one who makes his own meaning, and he lives that every day.
No, I've seen this child. He sure does.
Yes, and then I have Aha, and his name is actually Abel Soares the fourth. Aha is 4 for Hawaiian, and he's 5 years old. And so I've had them through grad school.
Yes.
I was studying for comps while on maternity leave. And they've been through it all. You know, they're just amazing and resilient and sweet and thoughtful, and they make it all worth it.
Reflecting both of their parents' wisdom in those eyes. It's like looking at a deep soul.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming today. Loved
thank
it.
You, Allana. This has been amazing.
Yeah, thank
You're
you,
really
Sade.
great at this.
Thanks, everybody. We'll put contact information in at the bottom. Dr. Sade Soares.
Thank you.